Hey everyone, it's Nintendo Holic, and today I'm going to be giving you a review of the NES, known as the Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo's 8-bit console that launched in 1985. A little information about the NES: that originally this was introduced in 1983, and it didn't come with Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. You see, back then in 1983, Nintendo was actually a company in Japan where they made arcade games like Donkey Kong Jr., and as well as others. But in 1983, they made this thing called the Nintendo Famicom. I'll put a picture up. So yeah, that's the Nintendo Famicom, aka the family computer. So by then Nintendo thought they should ship this to the US, as in the United States at the time in 1983, the video game industry was pretty much non-existent because of Atari making bad games as well as other companies. But most notably, there was E.T. and Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, which were massive disappointments. But then when the NES came, everyone was playing video games again, so it's my favorite console of all time, so yeah. So here's a look at the NES. Got the power and the reset button, Nintendo Entertainment System. Two controller ports. An RF switch, AC adapter, channel 3, channel 4. Back when that was a thing. And on the side, you've got audio and video composite. So yeah, back then composite was basically the 4K of its time, but now it's pretty laughable in terms of video quality. But I still love to play games on my NES. There's a lot of ways you can play NES games officially. The unofficial ways to emulate them, but the official ways are you can play them on the NES. You can play them on. There was a few when Nintendo made the Game Boy Advance. There was the NES Classic NES series, I believe, and they put a few NES games on GBA cartridges. Then there was Animal Crossing, which had a few unlockable NES games. There's even a way you can manipulate the memory card and play more NES games there, but I don't know much about that. Then you have the Virtual Console, the Wii, the 3DS, the Wii U, and even the Switch, where you can play online NES games with their online services if you subscribe to the services. But I have that, and right now it only has like 20 games, but there's also this little option. This is the NES Classic Edition. It comes with 30 built-in NES games. It's a plug-and-play console. It's a great gift. They're really hard to come by. Scalpers on eBay really drive the price up for these things. Luckily enough, I had a friend who was able to get me one at Best Buy, I believe. So then, yeah, it's a fun console. So let's take a look at the controller. This is the NES standard controller. This is like my favorite controller of all time. I mean, it's just so simple. I know some people don't like it because of the rough edges, but I never really found them to be a bother. So here's your D-pad. Oh yeah. Did you know this is the first video game console, the home console, to have a D-pad? It's quite revolutionary because every game console has a D-pad now. Back then, that wasn't the case. The first thing to have a D-pad was Nintendo's Donkey Kong Game & Watch, I believe. So, yeah. Pretty revolutionary. But if you don't like this controller, there's many alternatives. Let me get one right out. this is the dog bone controller, obviously not made by Nintendo, it's made by Tomy, because as you can see, Tomy and the Nintendo logo is not here. But it's a decent controller. I prefer the standard NES controller, but I know some people who would prefer this over that. And yeah, it's pretty much, as you can see, a dog bone shaped controller. What else have we got? Well, when you're playing games like, when you're playing light gun games, you're gonna need one of these. This is the Nintendo Zapper, the NES Zapper. It also came in orange color because when Nintendo thought, well, this kind of looks like a real gun, so we should probably make it orange to make it like a toy gun. After all, this is a toy gun and it plugs into your NES right there. And then you can basically play light gun games, most notably Duck Hunt. But Duck Hunt isn't the only game. It's the most well-known game to support the Zapper, but it's not the only game to support the Zapper. There are a few more games that support it, like Hogan's Alley and Wild Gunman. And yeah, oh, one thing you need to know about the NES Zapper. If you're going to play Duck Hunt or any Zapper game on your TV, make sure it's a CRT television. I can't stress that enough. It has to be an old, boxed up, probably with a VHS slot in, so you could play the light gun games. It only supports CRT, LCD, HD TVs, non-supported. It only supports CRT televisions, so that's something to keep in mind. One more controller I have here. There's a bunch of other controllers. You can look them up, but here's the NES Advantage. A lot of great arcade ports were for the NES, like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and Burger Time. But this is probably the best controller for those games. After all, they were from the arcade games, and it's pretty much, you got your joystick, you got these knobs that have turbo on your buttons. Then you have the slow button, which basically just pauses the game, and you got 1 and 2 play. It has 2 control ports, by the way. Very neat controller. So let's now take a look at some of the video options you got. Now back then, how do we hook up arcade? Well, not arcade. I'm stuttering. How do we hook up VCRs and things like electronic devices? Simple. An RF switch. This is the Nintendo RF switch. Plugs right to the back of the NES and to the back of your coax of the TV. And it's not the best performance. I mean, there's other ways. Of course you have, if I could just get it, you have composite. Use red and yellow. Red for audio, yellow for video. Just to know. So I'm making a mess here, but what you gotta know, this isn't the only type of NES. There's many others. There's clone consoles, which I'm not a fan of. I like to play the real deal. But some people would prefer clone consoles, because I can understand that, because, you know, these consoles, one thing you gotta know is the 72-pin connector. That can wear off over time. And then the console becomes less reliable and it's dead. So, just keep that in mind. If you want one of these, make sure the 72-pin connectors is intact. I've heard it's easy to replace the 72-pin connector, so I wouldn't try to experiment on it, but go for it if your NES is broken. So then you have the NES top loader. I'll put a picture of that right up. that was the NES top loader. Basically, that thing was to promote the NES during the Super Nintendo era, so to speak, when the Super Nintendo games being made and the NES was at the end of its life cycle. And that's pretty much, well, it's not, there's more NESs out there. You also have, of course, the NES Classic Edition. It comes with 30 games. You cannot add games officially. You can use an application called HackChi, and that'll add games to the system, and you gotta download ROMs. It's quite an operation. A simple operation, but an operation nonetheless. And there's also the Famicom Disk System. The Famicom Disk System used floppy disks, basically, as the NES used cartridges. So at the end of this video, I'm going to be showing you some of my entire collection of games I have at the console currently. And then, yeah. One more quick note, I just want to say that if you want to play Famicom games on your NES, the NES is region locked, but there is a way to get around that. And that's with this little game, get that ribbon out of there, this game converter. It's a 60 to 72 pin adapter, so you can connect Famicom games. Yes, this is the Japanese version of Balloon Fight. There's honestly no difference between this version and the American version. And some Famicom exclusives, like the Tower of Draga. It's a very underrated game made by Namco. I've had a lot of great memories with this. So yeah, those are the two Famicom games I own. Let's take a look at my NES games. So here's my NES collection as of right now. I have about 32, I believe, cartridges. And some of them are compilations, so I guess I have more than 32 games. Get that light out of there. First one, Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. Of course, this helped the industry get back on track for the US, so gotta have it. Super Mario Bros. Is a 2D platformer. I still think it holds up, even though a lot of people would disagree with me on that, but it's still a great game. Genius level design, and Duck Hunt is still a fun little shoot 'em up. Donkey Kong Classics, the label's a bit worn off, I guess, but as you can see, it has Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. It's a compilation, yeah. As it says, it has Donkey Kong 1 and Donkey Kong Jr., where two great 2D platformers, and tells the tale of Mario versus Donkey Kong. So, yeah, it's a great compilation, even though it's just two games. Rad Racer for the NES it's a good game. I like it. So let's just move on with all these games. Pro Wrestling, Baseball, Hogan's Alley, and this is another game that supports the light gun. As you can see here, it says light gun series. Donkey Kong 3, underrated. In my opinion, of course. Contra, everyone knows that Konami code. It all started here. I believe it did. The Legend of Zelda, the one that started it all. Gotta have that in your collection, I mean. By the way, this is the first game where you could save your progress and come back later, so it's quite revolutionary in that sense. Super Mario Bros. 2. It's very different from the other Marios, but it is canon and I like it personally, so it's a great game. Bubble Bobble, and yeah, as you can see, the cartridge is almost like bubbly itself, so how fitting. Mega Man 2, which is the best Mega Man game in my opinion. Excitebike. Friday the 13th. Rampage. Dr. Mario. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, were a very controversial take on Castlevania. Kind of think of it, a lot of Part 2s in NES games were controversial. Mario 2, Zelda 2. Tennis. Burger Time. Galaga. Blaster Master. Punch Out. Another note about this. This is also known as Mike Tyson's Punch Out as it originally came. But then Mike Tyson's contract expired, so then it's just called Punch Out featuring Mr. Dream. Still the same game, but this game is hard. I've beaten it a few times, but I suffice to say this is the hardest game I've ever managed to beat, so yeah. Tetris, arguably the best puzzle game. Ice Hockey. RC Pro-Am. Mario Brothers, the original, from the arcades. Kid Icarus. The very first Ninja Gaiden, the one that started it all, very tough. Kirby's Adventure. One thing that's not well known about this game, you could also save your progress here. This has a battery inside it as well, just like The Legend of Zelda. Kung Fu. And I guess I saved the best for last because Super Mario Bros. 3. Some people claim this to be their favorite game ever. To me, that favorite game is Super Mario World. That's my favorite game, but this is up there in my top 10. It's my favorite NES game, that's for sure. So enough about the cartridge collection. Let's see these games in some gameplay, and I'll end the video there. Thanks for watching, everyone, and now I will leave you with gameplay.